Give it a few minutes. Thanks for everyone's patience, but we're going to give it a couple minutes here and we'll get started. All right, I think that's pretty good. I see a lot of people are on. All right, so welcome everyone. Good evening. All right, thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight is the second of 3 community workshops, and we have city staff along with Mike Bally from MBC Consulting to go over some state legislation that will mandate changes to your trash services. All right, so I'll have the rest of the team introduce themselves shortly, but I am Ron Noda. I'm with the city of Los Alamitos, and the first thing I want to start off is to clarify that there was for outreach for the community workshops, the 3 community workshop, we used a graphic with 6 trash bins on it. I just want to clarify, as we have received several inquiries on this, that and again, I apologize for the graphic, but we will not be having 6 trash bins in front of our residents. All right, it's just unfortunately, like I said, it was just a graphic that we utilized. Right, and so again, I just want to make sure of that, and I will probably go over that as well. But again, tonight's meeting, it will be similar to the first one, and of course will be similar to the last one as well. The third one that will be held on Monday, March 1st, so next Monday at 6 o'clock. Again, I thank you for joining us, but after the meeting, if you know your neighbors or your friends or other residents of Los Alamitos, please tell them to join in. We have 3 outreach meetings again to discuss some legislation that is coming down in regards to your trash services. So I'm going to pass it along to Michelle Mueller here. She'll introduce herself and provide you some information for tonight's meeting. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Mueller. I'm also with the City of Los Alamitos. For tonight's presentation, if you do have any questions or comments during the presentation, if you scroll down to the bottom of your screen, you'll find an option button that says reactions. When you click that button, it'll have several icons. You can go ahead and click the hand icon, as you can see on Ron's top left corner of his screen. And we will call in order according to when we see the hands being raised. Outside of that, I'll go ahead and pass it along to Mike.
Thanks, Michelle. Hey, everyone. I'm Mike Ballier. Worked as a consultant to California municipalities for almost 30 years. So the city's asked me to explain what SB 1383 is. So let me share my screen. Oh, I need to be enabled to share screen. Okay. Anyways, I wanted to be able to explain to you what SB 1383 is and what it means to you as a resident or a business, really anywhere in California, but tonight we're talking about Los Alamitos. So let me try that share screen again. There we go. And I will start from here. Can everybody see my my first slide? Perfect. All right, so SB 1383 is regulation that was actually passed in 2016. What we're dealing with now is the end of the 4-year process where the specific regulations to make this law work have been approved by the Office of Administrative Law. So basically, it is the most substantial solid waste legislation in the past 30 years in California. Assembly Bill 939 was passed and required cities to develop plans to recycle 50% of their waste by the year 2000. Some of you may be familiar with that. A lot of cities started curbside recycling programs after that began. This is seeking to keep all organic waste out of the landfills, at least 75% of what we currently throw away. So about 20 million tons, 6 million of which is food waste. These regulations are seeking to enforce requirements that we no longer throw those materials in the trash. So this little pie chart here shows you what's in our trash. And if you see, the organic related portion is about 2/3 and food waste is about 18% of what we throw away. Of that amount, an unknown portion is edible. These regulations actually require certain commercial properties to donate their edible food because California does have residents going to bed hungry, and this is actually the first state to ever pass any type of regulation requiring donation of food. But California is often first on many things. What is driving this regulation is important to understand. The state basically in 2006 passed the Global Warming Solutions Act. And what that did is that required us over time to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in California to 40% of 1990 levels. It also established the state's ability to treat solid waste as a climate pollutant because methane gas from decomposing is a very strong short-term climate pollutant. And many of you may have been aware in around 2012, businesses were mandated to have a recycling program to help with that. 2016, businesses were mandated at various levels to start recycling their food waste. And now with SB 1383, starting in January of 2022, residential properties will have to start recycling their food waste. So quite a bit coming. So again, the SB 1383 requirements, the regulations that were passed, had a measurement factor in them. So it said by 2020, we have to cut half of the organic waste that's going to the landfills. I think because of not very good publicity about the regulation from the state, COVID hitting, we did not meet that goal. And what that meant is that a whole new group of businesses were thrown under the mandate. So now basically any business that generates 2 cubic yards of solid waste per week is mandated to recycle their organic waste. So 2022, when the regulations take effect, what does that mean? Well, it means that we have, whoops, I don't know how I slid forward there. So let me go back, folks. Sorry about that. Best laid plans. So here in 2020, that 50% reduction is what we missed. So more people were added to the mandate. When the regulations take effect, state enforcement begins. So that's when the state has actually required the city to pass ordinances and other enforcement mechanisms to basically make sure all required enforcement protocols are in place, including a schedule of fines for non-compliant entities. And the city's ordinance must match state developed standards, including a minimum fine structure. So the state's very serious about this. Again, it's understanding the driver. They want to address short-term climate pollutants, and these regulations are meant to get everybody on board. So for jurisdictions, what that means is the city of Los Alamitos is by 2022, we have to provide organics collection service to all residents and businesses. They are mandated to have a program. The city's responsibility is to make sure a program's in place. We also need to establish an edible food recovery program. And again, as I mentioned, there are certain businesses the state is targeting to donate the maximum amount of edible food they would otherwise dispose, is actually the terminology used. And so to ensure that that maximum amount is recovered, SB 1383 regulations actually require that these mandated food donors establish contracts or written agreements with food recovery organizations and services. Now, before you panic, it's the very largest food generators that will fall under this additional requirement. Wholesale food vendors, food distributors, grocery stores and supermarkets over 10,000 square feet. Those are the folks starting in 2022 that have to donate the edible food that they're throwing away. And then in 2024 is when large hotels, 200 rooms with food service, large healthcare facilities, 100+ bed hospitals with food service, restaurants of over 5,000 square feet and 250 seats, and then large venues and events fall under that. It falls to the city to make sure that that's happening and report to the state, or the state can fine the city. Education and outreach, of course, the city has to spearhead those efforts, make sure everybody's aware of the law, how to comply, what the programs are, technical assistance to help get your program started. There's also procurement requirements. The city has to buy a certain amount of organic material based on its population. That's the state's effort to create markets to help deal with all this new organic waste. Remember, 6 million tons of new food waste being recycled, 20 million tons of organic waste, which includes your landscape trimmings. It also includes cardboard and paper. The state considers that part of the organic waste stream, as well as untreated lumber. Lastly, you'll see that capacity planning. There needs to be facilities in place, and the city's responsibility is to secure capacity for all its organic material. That, of course, is going to be one of the things the city will be seeking in a new franchise service provider. So, as Ron mentioned, there are not 6 carts required. These are basically the configurations and colors that SB 1383 requires. It actually specifies that trash be in a gray container. At minimum, you need a black or gray lid starting in 2022. Blue is the color for recycling. At least a blue lid is required then, and then green for organics. Now, if you go to a 2-container service, which is what the city has now, you have a material recovery facility that takes recyclables out of the trash, and then you have a green waste cart. Well, we have to add food waste in 2022, but also there's this 75% organic recovery content requirement on material recovery facilities. If you're going to mix recyclables and trash together, the facility it goes to has to ensure that it's pulling out 75% of the organic waste, including cardboard and paper, by 2025. Otherwise, you can't send your material there, and you have to go back to a 3-cart system. 1-container collection service has that same stringent standard. Doubtful that many of those programs are going to survive the implementation of this regulation. But again, it is allowed, but you have to recycle 75% of the organics out of a single container to do so. So again, I mentioned the enforcement protocols. So again, an ordinance basically containing all of these SB 1383 regulations, or a franchise agreement passing those on to the hauler the city uses, needs to be adopted and in place January 1st of 2022. The state is now viewing 2022 through 2024, actually to January 2024, as a period of education, of kinder, gentler. There'll be no fines coming from the state unless you ignore what you have to do by 2022, but they're not going to penalize people for not, being perfect about putting the right materials in the right containers. Again, that goes away January of 2024. And my concern is the California Air Resources Control Board is over all of this. While historically Cal Recycle hasn't fined jurisdictions very frequently, the Air Resources Control Board does regularly. So again, I think you need to take that law's requirements seriously and comply with what the state is requiring the city to do, because I wouldn't imagine fines will be ignored forever. The jurisdiction's responsibility. So where is the city of Los Alamitos right now with organics recycling and food waste recycling? Well, the city has 330 businesses broken into tiers. So the very largest, tier 1s, tier 2s, those are folks generating 4 cubic yards of organic waste per week. There's basically 13 of those entities, and 2 of those are actually state and federal facilities, the base and the school district. 12 of those 13 have programs now. So the city has done very well with voluntary efforts. The next group of businesses is pretty large. That's any business with 4 cubic yards of trash or more per week. There's 140 of those. 10 of them have programs and 98 currently qualify for an exemption. The city's determined they have less than half cubic yard of organic waste per week. Unfortunately, in 2022, the state is changing the exemption threshold all the way down to 20 gallons per week. So if one of those businesses has 21 gallons a week of organic waste, then the law now requires them to have a food waste recycling program. I mentioned earlier about 2020, how we didn't as a state reduce 50% of the organic waste. So now the smaller businesses, what we call the tier 4s, the ones that generate less than 4 cubic yards of trash per week, but more than 2 cubic yards. Los Alamitos has a lot of those folks. There's 177 of them. We think a lot may qualify for that exemption, the 20 gallon. But again, that's something that falls on the city and its hauler to make those determinations, issue exemptions, and then hopefully the state doesn't overturn them. So again, that's just an example of the minutia, for lack of a better term, that the city is now being told it must handle to do number 1, provide organic recycling collection services. So again, if we go to the new franchise agreement, which we mentioned, the new hauler, or if the existing hauler is retained, there's a lot of new things that frankly they need to do to help the city comply with all these regulations. Again, they have to expand the services that they're providing. Residents and multifamily properties have not recycled their food waste ever. This law now requires it starting January 1st of 2022. So that's a very ambitious new program rollout. Any businesses that can't qualify for an exemption will have to start recycling their food waste. That's going to be substantially more service rolling out. The city really needs a partner in this edible food recovery. So, having the hauler help identify those large businesses and get educational materials to them, that should be part of the new agreement. Again, the haulers currently help the city with education programs. We have to expand them because the law requires us to basically let everybody know that's covered by these regulations. That includes residents, businesses, multifamily property owners, commercial property owners, facilities, self-haulers. The list is pretty extensive. I mentioned procurement. One of the nice things that's in the regulations is if the city can have the franchised hauler produce RNG, renewable natural gas, for their fleets, the city gets credit for that towards their annual purchase requirements that the state will be giving us later this year. We can get that 15 years of organic waste recovery capacity through the franchise agreement. And lastly, and I'll show you a slide in just a minute, all the monitoring that has to be done. The new hauler needs to be an active and effective partner in that monitoring and reporting of all these various compliance requirements. So again, as promised, this is kind of a list of the city's areas that they have to monitor. What's going on with organic waste collection, who has programs, who doesn't, who has contamination ultimately, who doesn't. The hauler programs, are they implementing everything that they're supposed to? Do we have third parties that are providing these services? We need to quantify that. Contamination minimization, there's actually state requirements to do route audits for the hauler to help with that is vital to see what containers have the wrong materials in them. The waiver process we mentioned, that's something that the city has to keep those written records for at any time inspection by the state. Education and outreach is fairly self-explanatory. We've gone through the edible food recovery. Recycled organic waste, we're going to be mandated to buy certain amounts. Recycled paper procurement as part of that. And again, a lot of inspection and unfortunately enforcement, or the state will enforce things against us. So that is all I'm going to cover right now. There's probably more that we can get to in questions and answers, but if you look in the middle, that is CalRecycle's website. That's the state agency responsible for implementing these regulations through jurisdictions. And that website provides a lot of information. I've really just scratched the surface. So I will turn off my screen now, take my glasses off because I need those to see, but I'm available to answer any questions as best I can.
We have no questions at the moment.
Answered everything, good.
Okay. Our first question reads, user iPad 3 and I can't see the last name, but Nieto. iPad 3 and Nieto.
Can you hear me? I think I'm unmuted now. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. So, see, my situation is that I own a couple of houses in Los Alamitos, and I've been paying. I pay the trash and the water.
Mhm.
That's what I do. That's what I've always done. That's what I do. So now, if this situation comes, and my tenants don't do what they're supposed to do, am I the one that's going to get fined?
Well, that is a good question. And again, I think a lot of these regulations and the specifics of them are not clearly flushed out, frankly. Again, they require the business owner, and for multifamily properties, that's the property manager. For a single family, 99.9% certain that would be the tenant that would be responsible, because they're the ones that are using the containers. You, just because you own the property, you're not there. But again, how do you enforce that with the tenant? Again, ultimately you own the property. So how is the fining structure going to differentiate and impact that? That's one of the areas that the city's actually currently working on, these prescribed code revisions. So that would be an area that we would be flushing out with the CalRecycle folks. Their model ordinance is really silent on that. So we'll see if they have any suggestions, or the city attorney, because again, ideally and really reasonably, the person that's using the service is the one that should be following the regulations. But again, ultimately, there's a fine, and how that's going to be implemented is a 6-month process. So again, don't be worried that somebody's going to be running around with a clipboard and fines and just handing them out. Locations will be notified when they're out of compliance. There's going to be a 2-year period, all of 2022 and all of 2023, where it's really just an education. Hey, we found contamination here. Here's the proper container to put it in. Please give this your attention. It's not until January 2024, 2 years later, that the fining process has to start. But again, that is typically a 6-month period. So you have a lot of chances to get those tenants in place and doing the right thing. That's all I can tell you on that right now.
And I have one more question, if nobody else has any questions. As far as commercial buildings go, like light manufacturing, how are they going to be affected? Are they still going to be using the big trash bins, or are they gonna have to do, you know, that's, I own one of those.
Every site's a little bit different, but again, the way the state considers organic waste to include landscape trimmings, virtually all commercial properties, multifamily properties are going to have to make sure that their landscaper is not throwing their green waste, their landscape waste into the trash.
Okay,
The second component, the food waste, if it's over 20 gallons, then they would probably need to subscribe to a separate cart to collect that material on a weekly basis.
okay,
That's the model program.
okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, we have our next question from Richard Marubayashi.
Thank you. I just had a real basic question. Just wanted to confirm, we're using the word organic to mean plant material only, right?
Well, I guess, although some organics could be animal-based material, but it's basically landscape trimmings, food waste, untreated lumber, and then also cardboard and paper, since they come from trees. Those are the components of the organic waste stream.
Okay, since we were talking about food waste, I was thinking, are we talking about meat as well?
We are, although some hauler programs don't include it. And again, at this point, the state's requirement is 75%. So they do allow the programs to match what the haulers can actually process through facilities. So right now, there's basically some that are whipping food waste into a slurry, and those are being pumped into anaerobic digestion systems at wastewater treatment plants. Other programs are mixing landscape waste with food waste and putting those through dry anaerobic digesters or composting systems. So sometimes meat can be an issue with some haulers, but again, overall, the requirement is that 75% of that material no longer be landfilled.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, our next question is from Kim Nguyen.
Hi there. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, neighbors. My question is, are we going to be required to use organic liners when we put our items in the bin? And then you mentioned about the haulers. Are you saying that you're going out to bid and that Republic will not be servicing our trash?
Well, the city's contract with, I'll take the second question first. The city's contract with Republic expires December 31st of this year, the day before all these new regulations hit. So the city would have to go through a request for proposals process anyway to get a new agreement in place. It's good timing because the state actually has a lot of requirements for new city agreements, so we can kind of start fresh. Whether the city continues with Republic or goes with another hauler is really going to depend upon the bids received. We're trying to get the best deal possible for the city. And sorry, I'm so forgetful. I forgot the first question. It was bags that were going to be used. Did they have to be organic?
Yeah, whether the organic liners must be used for when the items are put in the bins.
It depends on the hauler and the hauler's program. One of the things I will say is a lot of the compostable bags are not being accepted in composting programs because they are decomposable, but it takes them longer than the rest of the material. And since these companies are in the process of selling a finished product compost, they don't want things that look like plastic bags in their compost. Most haulers, in fact, I think it should be a requirement, will have you bag your food waste for collection. The reason being your collection cart would be a smelly mess if that material is just loose in it. But again, most of those haulers will rip those bags at their facility and then it becomes discard. So it's not a perfect system. But again, the compostable bags really aren't being composted at a very high level at this time. They need more work.
Okay. Do we have any more questions? We don't have any at the moment.
Food waste things. I'd like to know that one.
Yes,
I have no idea.
Rick Caldwell.
Rick's iPad?
Hi, Rick.
Hi. Yeah, just a quick question on some of the stuff even today. Like paper plates and things of that nature, paper towels. Where do those used paper plates and used paper towels, where would they go in? Where would they fit into the organic versus the
Well,
garbage?
unfortunately, a lot of paper plates are covered in wax to keep them from absorbing moisture and falling apart. So a lot of paper plates could not be included. Again, it would depend generally on your hauler and what they'll accept, but the law does require that paper that is contaminated with and mixed in with food waste has to be recycled. So again, napkins that have a lot of food all over them, I would assume your cheese paper from In-N-Out or the like that you haven't eaten, that should go in the food waste recycling container.
Which one?
Which is which one? No, I'm a little confused as to blue, brown, or the
Well,
green.
blue is traditional recycling. So that would be like bottles and cans, cardboard, paper, dry recyclable material goes in the blue. Organics is always going to go in green, except if you want to collect your food waste separate from green waste, then the food would go in a brown container. That's why we hope to have the new hauler selected a few months before 2022 starts, so you can start getting specific education information. Here's the container color, here's what goes in, here's what to keep out. So yeah, that's why education is one of the mandates from the state. It can get confusing.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, I'm showing Lisa, you have a check mark. I just want to make sure that you don't have any comments or questions. No? Okay. Our next speaker, we have Mamie Wong.
Yes, hello. So one of the questions I had that I thought of that I forgot to ask at the last meeting, the processing of the food waste, the container, is it going to be, do you know if the container is going to be sealed off sufficiently, not just for practical matters such as the smell that comes out of the decomposing food, but any potential for attracting rodents and insects, things like that, because that seems to be a potential issue that can create a lot of problems for people in terms of further health hygiene problems. Do you know anything about that? Because I think that's important.
Well, yeah, it's a logistical challenge to this effort. Now, all of the carts, which are typically going to be the collection containers used for residents and businesses, or bins, 1 or 2 cubic yard bins, they all have to have lids, but they do not have to have airtight lids. And again, that can be difficult, and even with the best lid in the world, if the last person using the container doesn't close it, there's a potential issue. So it's a logistical concern to be true. And that's something that, again, looking at the hauler and the container they're providing, the quality of the container. The other concern I have is food waste is very acidic. So the vehicle that's collecting that material, the seals on its compaction unit are going to wear out much quicker than just with normal trash. So again, make sure ensuring that vehicles are operating in a leak-free condition is another agreement requirement, something, again, the city will have to monitor, but it will be important. And, you know, I apologize, I don't have a better answer to your question because it is a legitimate concern. The regulations just don't address it.
The more I find out about this new law, it's that there are a lot of things, practical things that were not considered that affect all of us as it's going to be implemented. So if we end up with problems, a vector problem, rats, disease carrying rats, and cockroaches, just flies, ants, all of these problems. It's not just an annoyance. It's a health issue. Right now, everybody is well, not everybody, but a large number of us are stuck at home, and we have this problem where, you know, we have all of this waste we put into all the containers that we have right now, the 3 containers. But if we have to worry about, oh my God, if it's not sealed off sufficiently and it attracts rodents and roaches and everything else like that, there's another hygiene and disease potential there that is introduced, that there's a cost to that type of mitigation for that. I mean, there are all these costs. These issues all have a cost that were not considered, but they should have been.
Yeah, and I think, you know, again, it's an unfunded mandate, as most of them are, but this one's a very prescriptive one. It doesn't give the city a lot of leeway as far as, you know, hey, we don't have to have this program, you know, here's the program you have to have. I think that the state's reasoning is the material that we're talking about, these 20 million tons, are already going in a trash cart now. They're just not separated, the organics fraction from the remaining trash. So they're not viewing it as new material. It's newly isolated, but it's the same material. And again, that's why I think requiring that material be bagged for sanitary reasons will help. But again, since nobody is really doing this on a widespread basis, California is the first, you know, the concerns you have could prove to be valid. You know, if you take the same materials, but you isolate that organics fraction, is that going to attract vectors more than when it was in the trash? I don't think anybody knows for certain.
Because I think those kind of things can be put into a computer model where you generate estimates, where there are potentials for that. But it's that concern that throughout our city, well, throughout the entire state, but for our city, certainly, we don't want to have these outbreaks where there's a infestation of rats that never occurred before. I mean, on a more basic level, that's a quality of life issue where all of a sudden, and rodents now having to contend with that property owners, people who rent, anybody who has to do business here, all of us get affected by something like that, where, you know, you don't want to have this problem where all of a sudden, well, you know, the container wasn't sealed as it could have been, even if it's designed right, but it doesn't close right, something causes a problem. And so I don't know how that gets addressed, because that, I think the state has to give us guidance, and they should know that this is a potential problem. And then my second question has to do with the cost. Services, this new service of food waste disposal, is that going to be, how does anyone know what the schedule of cost is for something like that? Because that seems to be, to me, something that should be put out there so people get an idea of what's going on, because it's not going to be free, and somebody's and what I'm concerned about, it's going to be the way it's going to be priced. It's going to be fairly regressive for the people who are economically struggling in our city, who have lost jobs or are underemployed. They're already struggling, but if they're this fee that's assessed to all of us. You know, it's just like with any tax, it's regressive. It always hurts the struggling the most. And I'm trying to find out how much is this going to cost every month or every quarter, how this is going to get charged. Is there a dollar amount being put out there?
Well, that's one of the reasons it's good that the city's going out to bid right when this starts, is actually a competitive process is going to determine what that rate is. Again, you're adding an additional collection cart because of regulation changes. The ability to mix your recycling and your trash and go to a facility may cost an exorbitant amount, and argue to separate those materials at the source. There are just a lot of unknown factors. I think from looking at Orange County cities that have recently priced this new service in, it seems, you know, well into the 20s, $23 or so is the cost structure. I just did a project in Costa Mesa, and their residential is going to grow to $24.10, for example. It's not to say that's going to be the rate that Los Alamitos gets. Again, we're doing a competitive process to try to make the rate as low as possible. But the regulations on facilities, the addition of an extra collection program, and all of the monitoring and reporting that not just the city has to do, but the hauler has to do. Those are all unfunded mandate costs. And again, it's an unknown impact, but it's not unknown that it will be an impact.
But that $23 that you just mentioned as an estimate, or example, is that per month or every other month?
That's the per month average in Orange County cities. You know, right now the Orange County average is a little bit over $20 per month. The ones that have gone to organics tend to be about $3 higher. But again, those are sometimes existing agreements that are being renegotiated that have gone through multiple years of CPI increases. For example, Fountain Valley just added a cost for green waste. I helped in that negotiation, and I believe their rate went to $21.89. Green waste used to be able to be chopped up and spread and mixed with dirt to cover the landfill every day. It was called alternative daily cover, and the County of Orange would accept that material for free. That program went away January 1st of 2020. That was another state law, Assembly Bill 1594, that said that can no longer count as recycling. That green waste can't go in the landfill except as trash. And so now the cost for green waste went up to $40 some to landfill, $60 to $70 per ton to compost. And that caused a rate without food waste in Fountain Valley to jump to $21.92, I think was the ultimate figure.
So it's going to be for the year, maybe something like between $250 and $300 a year per family or business, or however.
Well, for residential service, hopefully we can get a more competitive rate than that. But yeah, if it was $20 per month, let's say, that would be $240 per year. Now for businesses, they have different containers, different pricing, but typically they're bigger containers, so they would cost more than $20 per month. I think the average 3-yard bin once a week is probably, for trash service in the county right now, $150 a month. Recycling containers are impacted because of China's green sword policy. It's more difficult to sell recyclables, and the price of them has gone down substantially. And then you have an organics cart that you'll have to pay for to put the food waste in. So again, by doing a competitive process now, the city's trying to get the best that the market will allow, but really the state has not done us any favors cost-wise with this regulation. Again, their focus is on the environment and climate pollutants and affecting change in that area without a tremendous amount of concern for the cost.
Yeah, I think that's really a frustrating component of this, that yes, the intention is, I think, is good, but that everything under the guise of it's unfunded, which to me is synonymous with the people pay for it. They should just come out and say, you know, we have all these lofty plans, but we don't want to pay for it. We want you to pay for our plan. They should just come out and say that and be honest, because that to me is frustrating. All of this, yes, we're trying to benefit the community at large in the long term, but I can see this significantly negatively affecting quality of life throughout the state, because all of a sudden, all these things, not just the effort, but that some of these things, while they may be helping all these other things, there's going to be job loss as a result of this. Because my understanding is that part of this law is to create all these new green jobs, but there's on the other side, those new jobs will cancel out and cut existing jobs for people in those industries that are creating these problems. I think that nobody wants to talk about that, but all of these things creates a lot of, it's a mixture of good and not so good, I think, because we're going to have all these things that people aren't talking about. There are practical issues that, you know, why didn't they think about all these issues of vector and all these costs that are passed down to the residents and businesses and so on. It seems that it wasn't thoroughly.
Unintended consequences are a potential challenge to this. I agree. And again, one of the few things that the city can choose is whether to be under a standard compliance approach or a performance-based approach. And again, in our draft RFP, we're leaning towards the standard. If you do the performance, then 90% of your neighbors, your community at large, businesses, residents have to be subscribed to the program. There are space constraint waivers. There's de minimis waivers. Again, the volume of material that's generated that the city can control. Again, if you're under a standard compliance approach program, you don't have to have 90% of the people subscribing. Again, it's a logistical challenge. And so we're trying to negotiate through as best as possible. But again, securing as economical a rate for all these new required services is the challenge of the RFP, the request for proposals from haulers coming up later this year.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Mike just last said is, Ms. Wong, a lot of your concerns are right on, and the finances are definitely a very, very valid question. But again, I just want to reiterate what Mike said is, we are currently right now in a contract with Republic Services. It expires at the end of the year, and we don't know what the price is going to be coming up. And I don't want anyone to leave here saying, oh, it's going to be anywhere between this amount to this amount, because we just don't know yet. That's why we're going through the whole process, and we're going to do it in a timely fashion where we do hopefully secure the new hauler, and then we will have plenty of time to do outreach to let the community know how much the rate will be if it does increase. We're not going to come in, you know, on December 1st and give everyone just 4 weeks notice and say, hey, introducing our new hauler and this is the rate. We have put in our timeline where we're going to provide very adequate time to notify and do outreach to the community to let everyone know potentially if there is a new hauler and potentially if there is a price increase. So again, I want everyone to understand that we don't know what the price is. And Is there, yeah, like Mike said, other cities in Orange County has had increases in their trash due to the organics. But at the same time, I want to tell everyone that every city in Orange County is different as well. So we have to just wait and go through the whole process.
Thank you.
Doesn't look like we have any questions at the moment. Would anybody else like to ask a question?
If that is it, last call, but please, if you have questions, we have our very last meeting scheduled for next Monday, March 1st at 6 p.m. Again, it's via Zoom, or if you want to, please feel free to reach out to city staff and then via email or by phone call. But again, if you do have any additional questions, we will have our last of the 3 meetings next Monday, March 1st at 6 p.m. Okay? With that being said, again, I thank you very much on behalf of the rest of the team here for attending tonight. And everyone enjoy the rest of your evening and have a great week. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.